I found my death notice on a Tuesday afternoon, folded neatly under a stack of coupons and rubber bands in the top drawer of my husband's roll-top desk. He kept his stamps there, and I was only looking for 2 forever flags to mail the water bill. Instead, my fingers brushed a thicker sheet, heavy cream stock, crisp edges, that sweet, dry smell of new paper. I unfolded it and saw my own name. Ruth Ellison, 78, beloved wife, mother, and friend, passed away peacefully at home. The words hit like a slow car to the knees. Not pain at first, just surprise and the indignity of metal. Passed away peacefully at home. My home, where the tulips were coming up wrong and the refrigerator wheezed on humid days and you had to tug the sliding door twice in spring because the track stuck. I stood there at the desk with the afternoon sun showing every dust mote in the air like I'd never cleaned in my life, and I read my own obituary. The details were specific. Born in Macon, Illinois. Former school secretary. Survived by husband, Harold Ellison, and stepchildren, Paige and Trevor. Church member at St. Albans. A memorial service to be announced. In lieu of flowers, donations requested to the Harold and Ruth Community Education Fund. There was a Gmail listed, and below that a funeral home's logo I recognized from the big intersection by the grocery store. The date at the top was blank, a small mercy, but the file name printed faintly in the corner made my skin prickle. Honest Ellison for final docs. I lowered myself into Harold's old swivel chair, the one that squeaks on the backward lean. My hands were steady, it was my breath that forgot itself. The desk smelled like graphite and lemon pledge and something faintly sweet, a breath mint maybe, or the aftershave he'd switched to when the old brand started smelling like mothballs. In the brass tray beside the mousepad lay a pile of papers clipped together, his Medicare statements, a flyer about maximizing survivor benefits, and a brochure from our credit union with a smiling couple my age holding hands on a beach I would never visit. The beach read peace of mind for your golden years. My golden years were apparently already over. I read the obituary again because that's what you do when something wants to trick you. The sentences had that careful bland tone of the volunteer who writes about everyone the same way. But whoever wrote this knew me. It said I loved crossword puzzles, only Tuesdays and Fridays, that I made pies for the church fair, pecan never apple, that I cherished time with grandchildren, true though infrequent, Paige's kids were always busy. It even listed the address of our neighborhood and said I'd lived there for decades. That word stuck. Lived. Harold. I called, and immediately was angry at myself for calling him into this. The house answered with its old noises, the heat kicking on, the faint tick inside the pantry where the shut-off valve argues with itself. It was 2 in the afternoon. He wouldn't be home for hours. Golf, then coffee, then showing off his new hearing aids to whichever friend still pretended to be deaf to Harold's stories. I set the paper down and saw there were more. A second page with service notes, to him circled, he'd picked the ones I couldn't hit the high notes on, an order of service, a pale blue border. A third page was a draft program with a photo box marked Insert Best Photo. I pictured the snapshots on our hallway shelf, me in my red sweater on Christmas, me in the backyard squinting into July sun, me holding a lemon pie with my arm in a sling from that time I fell off the step stool changing the smoke alarm battery after waiting 2 weeks for Harold to get to it. He would choose the red sweater. He liked the red sweater because it made me look festive in a way he could show off, like the new patio set he got at Costco on special, just $8.99 Ruth, can you believe that? Underneath the program was a single sheet with bullet points. Action items. The first said, call St. Albans to reserve hall, Carol in office. The next, notify H&A. Then post obit with the courier, ask for community rate. A line farther down, life insurance claim, United Mutual, need death certificate. Below that, in Harold's blocky handwriting, an underlined reminder, policies in safe. And then, like a small sigh, sell Buick? I sat back as far as the chair would let me. The chair squeaked its same old protest. Harold had always loved a list. He liked crossing things off, arranging his future in boxes he could check. You don't marry a list maker and not learn the danger of them. But this was not an oil change list. This was step-by-step grief he'd planned for himself. For himself, not for me. Because the focus, rudely openly, was on what happened for Harold after I died. The insurance, gifts to a fund with his name first, notifying the HMA so he wouldn't get fined for the wreath I put up before Thanksgiving. The memorial would be simple, he'd always said he hated a fuss. That line in my obituary, passed away peacefully at home, read like he was tidying. As if I were laundry. As if the hospice that never came and the prayers I never asked for and the casseroles we never ate would be tidied too. It felt greedy in the way polite greed always does, neat, efficient, justified as planning. We had talked about arrangements together, years ago gently, in the hospital cafeteria after Harold's gallbladder surgery when everything still felt tender. I told him what hymns I liked and that I didn't want a slideshow that dragged. He told me how his mother's funeral had been too quiet because no one wanted to sing and how he wanted people to tell stories even if the stories weren't flattering. It had been one of our kinder conversations. We came home and tucked the paper in the file cabinet next to the warranties and my receipts. End of life wishes we'd labeled it, in that cheerful way of the living. How my obituary, _final, ended up in his desk ready to go, with a fund named for us and a list of calls he needed to make, I couldn't say. But I could guess. Harold had never met a form he didn't want to pre-fill. I lifted the obituary again and the paper trembled, pleased with itself, until my hands steadied. In the margin of the program draft, a note I almost missed, program printing, page can do through office. Ask her to pull nice photo, 2019 Thanksgiving. That would be the one at Trevor's, the last time we were all together, trestle table, store-bought rolls, the gravy too salty. Harold had made a toast then about next chapters, and I had pressed my napkin into my lap until it left a crinkle I ironed out the next morning. Next chapters, he loved that phrase. It made endings sound like organizational choices. I put everything back exactly where it had been because I was raised to tidy other people's messes. Then I stood in our kitchen that still wore the wallpaper I chose in 1987, peach blossom, hands flat on the cool formica, and counted the breaths it took for my anger to locate its name. The name wasn't death. The name wasn't even obituary. It was insurance. In the junk drawer, Harold kept 37 rubber bands, for takeout menus, 2 new packs of AAA batteries, and our policy folder. The folder was yellow, with faint pencil marks for my grocery lists on the front because I wrote where I wrote. I flipped it open. United Mutual, whole life it said, primary Benny, Harold Ellison. Beneath that, a policy Harold had added last year without me noticing, accidental death rider. My mouth went dry. The boiler bumped on 3 rooms away, loudly and then not at all. I put the folder back, shoved the drawer closed, and wanted something stupid, wanted to cry at a casserole dish, wanted to break a stamp, wanted to take a permanent marker to the peach blossom wallpaper and write no, simply, in big letters like my grandchildren do when the rules are unjust. Instead I straightened the doormat by the slider because it had crept crooked, and I stood with my fingers on the glass and watched the backyard. The maple had the first red spots. The bird bath, Hank would have called it pretty if he were a different man, was empty because I hadn't filled it this week. I thought wildly that maybe I should give Harold something to mourn, something real like the bird bath or the way the tulips came up wrong. Then I thought less wildly but with more heat that maybe I should give him exactly what he wanted, and then watch what he did with it. The phone rang at 4. "Hi Ruthie," Harold said, cheerful. He still called me that when he needed something. They were slow at the course today. "Did you get the mail? Anything fun?" He meant checks. "I found a few things," I said. "Atta girl," he said. "Hey, quick thing. Do you still have the number for St. Albans office? Carol?" I was thinking of calling about the hall, for the senior group meeting. That potluck thing. I could hear the lie, the tiny pause after the hall, the way senior group meeting arrived already in its coat. "I'll look," I said, and my voice sounded like it was making tea. Great, he said, and filled the next minute with nothing, whether the neighbor's trash can at the curb too early again. His back was tight from the 10th hole like it is every week because he won't stretch. After he hung up, I went to the hallway where the church directory hung on a thumbtack and I stared at the page. Carroll office, 555, 0142. I tore a post-it in half and wrote the number down, then wrote it down again, because I was beginning to want evidence of myself in this house. At 5:40, the door opened and Harold brought air in with him, the cold September kind that makes the living room lamps look more yellow. He kissed my cheek, perfunctory, and put his keys in the ceramic dish with a clatter. "You look nice," he said, noticing I'd brushed my hair. "Pork chops." "Chicken," I said. "Good," he said. "Pork's been off lately." He took off his jacket and put it on the back of the dining chair instead of the hook, like he knew I'd move it because I always have. He washed his hands loudly, and then sat and told me about a man named Ron who joined their foursome and had a ridiculous swing. Like he was swatting at bees, Harold said. He checked his phone 3 times while he talked, and once in the middle of my saying nothing he said, "Do you think the Goodwill will pick up this week?" "I've got that list of," he stopped. The list was in his desk. After dinner, he watched the local news and said the anchor looked tired, and I cleared plates and took my time with the sink. The kitchen window reflected my face back at me in that way that makes you look like a stranger. I caught the shape of my mouth when it frowns. I didn't stop it. At 8, the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone. I was halfway to the foyer when I heard voices and then the sound, unmistakable, of a casserole dish changing hands. "We just wanted to drop this off," a woman said, soft. "We heard. We love you both." The door shut gently, and Harold came into the kitchen carrying a foil-covered rectangle. "What on earth?" I said. He set it on the counter, sheepish pride spreading like butter. "From the Jacksons. Isn't that something?" "We heard what?" He pulled back the foil, pretending to be surprised by baked ziti because it's always baked ziti. "You know how folks get. Carol probably sent out one of those church emails about you being under the weather." He said under the weather like it was a coat someone else had put on me. I looked at the foil, then at him, at his face that had grown soft around the eyes but still set hard around the mouth when he was managing me. "Under the weather," I repeated. "Did you post something?" "Post?" he said the innocent way. "Like online? You know I don't do all that. Paige handles that stuff." "So Paige posted something," I said. He shrugged a shoulder. "Probably just a prayer request. People like to help." He'd gone too far this time or not far enough. A casserole is not grief, and yet it is. It's the shape it takes when there's a gap and no one knows what else to carry into the kitchen. In this house, where we kept everything polite, a casserole on a Tuesday said we were halfway to something. I pictured my obituary again, memorial service to be announced, and my hands, dripping from the sink, started to shake at last. "You're being foolish," I said quietly, not sure if I meant him or myself. He blinked. "What?" "Nothing," I said, "because we have a marriage full of nothings that once were something." "I'll write Carol a thank you." He went to his chair and clicked the remote and laughed at a commercial like men do to show they're easy, and I stood in our kitchen and wrapped the ziti tighter in its foil because even kindness spoils if you leave the edge up. When he finally went to bed, I didn't. I carried the obituary from his drawer to the dining table and set it down with a pen and a notebook. I wrote what I knew, like I used to do when a parent called the school to say their son hadn't pushed anyone on the playground and the teacher said he had. I wrote dates and names and Carol's number and the phrase Harold and Ruth Fund because I wanted to see it all in one place. Then I opened our file cabinet and took out the end-of-life wishes folder we'd made together on that tender day at the hospital. The paper inside was tidy and kind. It named hymns we both could sing. It named the nephew I wanted to read Psalm 23 because he doesn't choke on the word valley. It named Harold as the person who would speak for me if I couldn't. Seeing it in our joint handwriting was like seeing a wedding photo, proof that there was once a us who made decisions without one of us plotting. Tucked behind the papers, something new. A carbon copy of a form with my name typed neatly at the top, durable power of attorney, healthcare. The signature at the bottom was mine and not mine at the same time. It looked like my hand had been rushed or heavy or asleep. I put my fingers over the ink, feeling nothing but paper. The old house hummed the way it does when the refrigerator kicks on and the heat cuts off at the exact same moment, one sound ending, another beginning. In that seam, I made my decision. Harold wanted a widow who would make his life simpler. He wanted casseroles to show up and a fund in his name to pay for the grand gestures he liked giving at the Rotary. He wanted insurance money to settle the credit card bill from the patio set we didn't need, the hearing aids he didn't wear because they make the world too loud, the trip to Myrtle Beach he kept promising we'd take after one more golfing season here. He wanted a narrative where he had lost someone and was brave and organized about it. I would give him grief, all right. But not the kind he could schedule. First thing in the morning, I would call Carol. Then United Mutual. Then the credit union. Then a lawyer whose number Tom, the retired sheriff on our block, kept in his wallet for when people tried to be clever. I picked up the obituary and read it once more, top to bottom, like a woman practicing a speech she does not plan to give. Then I slid it into a fresh plastic sleeve, just like the teacher I used to be taught me to do. I put the sleeve in my tote, next to my wallet and my church directory and a granola bar because meetings always go long. I washed the foil pan, because good pans are hard to come by, and set it to dry. And I smiled, not nicely. If a man wants so badly to be a widower that he writes the words for the town to read, let him see what it feels like to lose the part of his story that feeds him. Let him see what it's like to live with a wife who has decided to stop dying for him. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds like it was in on something. I'd been up all night with that same old kitchen clock marking each minute like a metronome for my anger. I was calm, dangerously calm, the kind of calm I used to have when a parent stormed into my office at the school yelling about unfair grades. Back then, I'd wait, smile, and let them talk themselves tired before showing them the test paper with their child's answers. Today, Harold would be the parent. I dressed carefully. A soft blue blouse, pressed slacks, my old pearl earrings. I combed my gray hair back and clipped it with the silver barrette Harold gave me for our 30th anniversary, one of the few gifts he hadn't kept a receipt for just in case. The barrette caught the light and felt almost like armor. At 7:30, I heard the familiar shuffle of Harold's slippers and the throat-clearing routine he did before entering any room. He smelled faintly of shaving cream and coffee, same as always, as if nothing in the world had changed. "Morning, Ruthie," he said, cheerfully. "Didn't hear you get up." "I had things to do," I said evenly, pouring coffee into his favorite mug, the one that said "World's Smartest Husband" in chipped blue paint. He chuckled at his own cup like it had made the joke. "I'll take that as true today," he said, sitting down and unfolding the paper. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I called Carol this morning," I said, letting the sentence drop like a pebble into still water. He looked up over his glasses. "Carol. At St. Albans. You know, since you mentioned her yesterday." He blinked slowly. "Oh, right, that. The senior group whole thing. I told her we'd love to host something. She said she'd check the calendar and call back." "Ah," he said, pretending to find something interesting on the front page. Good. I could almost see him recalculating his story. His hands twitched over the paper, folding and unfolding the corner. When he left for golf 20 minutes later, whistling off-key, I followed him to the door and waved like a doting wife. But as soon as his car disappeared down the street, I dialed another number, United Mutual Insurance. "Thank you for calling United Mutual. How can I help you today?" The woman's voice chirped through the line. "This is Ruth Ellison," I said calmly. "I'd like to check on the beneficiary information for my life policy. There seems to be a mistake." A short pause. "Of course, Mrs. Ellison. May I verify your address and policy number?" I read them off. Papers rustled. Then came that too-practiced customer service tone. "Yes, I have your file right here. The policy lists your husband, Mr. Harold Ellison, as the primary beneficiary." "And secondary?" There was a tap of keys. "It looks like there is no secondary beneficiary listed." I smiled without meaning to. "That's what I thought. I'll need to make an appointment to change that." "Of course. Would you like to name a new secondary?" "No," I said. "I'd like to make myself the primary." A nervous laugh from her end. "Ma'am, I'm afraid that's not how." "I was joking," I interrupted, with the kind of grandmotherly tone that makes people relax just enough to stop paying attention. "But I will be adding someone new. And possibly removing someone old." She hesitated. "Understood, Mrs. Ellison. We can schedule that for tomorrow morning if you'd like." "Tomorrow it is," I said. After hanging up, I stared at the yellow folder on the counter. United Mutual, whole life. I tapped the edge until it lined up perfectly with the grain of the table. Then I called Tom Sanders, the retired sheriff from down the street. "Morning, Ruth. You're up early. Everything all right?" "I need a lawyer," I said. "A good one. Not for suing anyone, just someone who's quiet and clever." "Quiet and clever," he repeated. "That'd be Peter Jensen. Office by the old bank. What's the trouble?" "Oh, just paperwork." He chuckled. "Paperwork's how most wars start, Ruth. You need me to drive you?" "No, Tom. But thank you." By 9, I had a list: Carol from the church, United Mutual, Peter Jensen the lawyer, and most importantly, Paige. Paige had always been polite, distant. My stepdaughter. She was polite the way people are at a cashier window, smiling but already done with the transaction. She and her brother Trevor grew up with Harold's first wife, who died young. When Harold and I married, they were both already in college. We played at being family, but they always kept one hand on the door. Paige was 38 now, a dental hygienist with perfect posture and perfect phone manners. I called her office. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Ruth." "Oh. Hi Ruth," she said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I just wanted to check something with you. Your dad mentioned you were helping with a printing project for the church." Silence. Then a cautious, "Printing project?" "Yes, for the service hall. Some kind of program." "Oh right, yes. He emailed me a file last week. Said it was just formatting practice." My stomach twisted. "Do you still have it?" "Probably. Why?" "I'd love to see what you're working on. Maybe I can help." "Oh sure. I'll forward it right now." 10 seconds later, my inbox dinged. Subject line, R_Ellison_obituary_finaled PDF. Paige added a little note, "Looks good, doesn't it? He's been so organized lately. P." I stared at the file like it was radioactive. Then I opened it. My face, stared back in the top right corner, the red sweater photo from Thanksgiving. Harold had cropped out Trevor's toddler and adjusted the brightness. My obituary was now fully formatted, with order of service, a floral border, and a small photo of a white lily at the bottom. He'd even picked a serif font that looked solemn without being fancy. Under tributes, it read, "Words from her loving husband Harold. Scripture reading by stepdaughter Paige." I clicked print. The printer whirred to life, each page sliding out crisp and damning. I stacked them neatly and slid them into my tote bag. When Harold came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading. "You're home early," I said. "Golf got rained out. You all right?" "Fine." He opened the fridge and whistled tunelessly. "What's for dinner?" "Leftovers," I said. "Baked ziti. From the Jacksons." "Still." He laughed, closing the door with his knee. "We'll never finish that thing." "Maybe we won't have to." He looked at me, confused, but I smiled just enough to keep him guessing. That night, when he fell asleep snoring softly beside me, I took his phone from the nightstand. His passcode was still our anniversary, 11/23. I went to his email. Sure enough, there it was, to Carol, St. Albans, subject line, "Pre-arrangements for Ruth." Attached were the same documents I'd found in the drawer. My obituary. The program. The action list. But there was one new line in the email body. "Hi Carol, please keep this confidential for now. Ruth's been feeling off lately, and I just want to be prepared in case something happens. Insurance paperwork already handled." Bless you. Insurance paperwork already handled. He'd already moved it. The man had planned my death like a vacation. I took screenshots of everything, emailed them to myself, then carefully placed the phone back exactly where it was. The next morning, I went to see Peter Jensen. His office smelled like old books and coffee that had been microwaved twice. He was maybe 60, balding, with that kind of patient expression lawyers wear like armor. "So, Mrs. Ellison," he said after I'd explained, "you believe your husband is preparing financially for your death, prematurely." "Yes," I said. "And possibly forging my signature. I'd like to make sure if anyone dies soon, it's not my finances that do." He didn't smile. "Smart. Here's what we'll do. You'll update your will immediately. Make a new power of attorney, naming someone other than your husband. And we'll place a hold on any life insurance disbursements without your direct verification." "Can we do that quietly?" "Quietly's my specialty," he said. By the time I left, my tote was heavier with new papers, fresh signatures that made me, officially, my own person again. That afternoon, I called Paige. "Sweetheart, thank you for forwarding that file. I took a peek, it's beautifully done." "Oh, isn't it?" she said. "Dad's been so thoughtful lately. He said he just wanted to be prepared, in case of anything sudden." "In case of anything sudden," I repeated. "Yes. He's always been good at thinking ahead." Do you want me to change anything? No, dear, I said, letting warmth creep into my tone. It's perfect. In fact, don't delete it just yet. You might need it sooner than you think. Wait, what? Nothing, I said sweetly. See you Sunday. That Sunday, Harold put on his navy blazer and told me we were going to the church to help set up. When we arrived, I noticed Carol's expression, the kind of uneasy smile people wear when they think they know something private. She hugged me gently, like I was porcelain. Ruth, it's so good to see you up and about, she said. Up and about? I echoed. I wasn't aware I was down. Her cheeks flushed. Oh, your husband mentioned you hadn't been feeling well. I smiled, sharp as a tack. You'll be pleased to know I'm very much alive. Harold shifted beside me, clearing his throat. Carol's just worried, Ruthie. Of course she is, I said. After all, she's already planning my funeral. Carol blinked, confused. Excuse me. I leaned in. Maybe you should check your sent mail, dear. Harold's jaw tightened. Ruth, that's enough. No, Harold, I said softly. I think it's just beginning. Carol excused herself quickly, and Harold turned to me with a look I hadn't seen since the early years, fear wrapped in politeness. When we got home, he slammed the door harder than he meant to. What the hell was that about? Oh, I said, hanging my coat, I thought you liked being prepared. You've already got my obituary printed, after all. Might as well let people rehearse. His face went pale. You went through my things? You left them where any dead woman could find them. He stared, speechless, for once. I'll be sleeping in the guest room, I said quietly. You can start drafting that notice again. This time, it'll be for the part of you that's still decent. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because Harold wasn't the only one with a plan now. The house felt different after that Sunday. Still. Too still. Like it was waiting for someone to speak first. Harold avoided me in ways that looked polite from the outside. He'd walk into a room and immediately remember something he had to do in the garage, or in the yard, or in the basement where his important boxes lived. I let him have his distance. Distance, I was learning, was a better weapon than any raised voice. Silence makes a guilty man confess to himself. I spent those days rearranging things he never thought I noticed. The insurance folder, the joint account files, the car title, all of it quietly moved to a new fireproof box that lived under my sewing table. I went to the bank twice, under the excuse of straightening out Social Security deposits. By the end of the week, the joint account had become separate ones. Mine still bore the name Ruth Ellison, but with only my signature on the access line. I transferred what was mine, and left Harold enough to cover the utilities. Petty? Maybe. But a man who writes your obituary while you're still setting dinner deserves to learn what it feels like to live without the warmth he took for granted. On Wednesday, the phone rang while I was pruning the dying azaleas out front. The screen said Carol, St. Albans. I smiled before answering. Ruth, she said, her voice hesitant, I just wanted to apologize again for the misunderstanding Sunday. I truly didn't mean to. Oh, don't worry, dear, I said kindly. We all get ahead of ourselves sometimes. Though, it did make me curious. Did Harold ever send you anything else? Perhaps about me. There was a pause on her end, the kind filled with small moral calculations. Well, she said, he did drop off a donation form for the memorial fund last week. He said it was in your honor, for when the time comes. I thought it was sweet. Sweet, I echoed. Yes. Like arsenic in tea. I pardon. Nothing, Carol. You've been a big help. And if you could do me one more favor, don't process that donation. Not yet. Let's wait until I'm officially gone. I added a smile to my voice, the kind that sounds light but lands heavy. Carol stammered something polite and hung up. When I came back inside, Harold was at the kitchen counter, pretending to read the mail. He didn't look up when he said, Carol called. She did, I said, wiping my hands. She told me all about your generous memorial fund. He froze for half a breath. It's a tax write-off, Ruth. Everyone sets those up. Sure. I'm sure they do. I poured myself some iced tea, let the silence stretch between us like fishing line. By the way, I moved the insurance paperwork. He looked up sharply. You what? I moved it. Somewhere safe. You don't have to worry about it now. It's handled. He blinked, then gave a small tight laugh. You're playing games, Ruth. Not at all, I said. I'm just being organized. Isn't that what you wanted? He stared for a long moment. You're not yourself lately. Oh, I'm very much myself, I said, smiling. For the first time in years. He dropped the mail and walked out without another word. By Friday, the gossip had spread through town like syrup on pancakes. A few church ladies called to check in. One brought soup. One brought flowers. They all looked at me the same way, soft, pitying, already grieving. Carol must have told someone, who told someone else, who told everyone. I didn't stop it. Let them whisper. Let them build a story I could use. That afternoon, I called Paige again. Sweetheart, I said, I just wanted to thank you for all your help lately. Oh sure, she said, clearly uncomfortable. Is Dad there? No. But he'll be home soon. I just wanted to make sure you're coming over Sunday. I'm making pot roast. Of course, she said. Do you want me to bring anything? Just yourself, I said. And maybe bring that pretty program you made for me. I'd like to frame it. She laughed nervously. Frame it? That's morbid, Ruth. Life's morbid, dear, I said softly. See you Sunday. Sunday came hot and sticky, the kind of Midwest day where even the curtains looked tired. I had the pot roast in the oven by noon and the air conditioner humming steady. Paige arrived first, wearing her neat khaki skirt and that tense smile she saved for difficult visits. Trevor came later, dragging his wife, Nancy, and their 2 teenagers behind him. Harold was already sitting at the head of the table, pretending we were a normal family. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Paige complimented the roast, Trevor talked about his new car, Nancy asked if I tried yoga for women my age. I smiled through it, waiting. Then between bites, I looked at Harold and said lightly, Sweetheart, would you mind passing the salt? Oh, and while you're up, could you bring that folder from your desk? The one with my obituary. The table went silent. Paige's fork clattered against her plate. What? Harold's eyes flicked to me, warning. Ruth. Oh, don't be shy, I said, my tone honeyed. Paige, your father's been quite the writer lately. He drafted the loveliest obituary for me. Even included your name as a reader. I thought it was touching. Paige turned pale. Dad, what is she talking about? Harold stammered. It was just a planning thing. People do it all the time. With the help of insurance companies and forged signatures? I interrupted. Nancy's hand went to her mouth. Trevor muttered, Jesus, Dad. I stood up slowly, feeling the room tilt just slightly in my favor. Paige, dear, could you get that file from your phone? The one he sent you to print? Show your brother. Paige hesitated, then scrolled through her emails, her face tightening as she found it. You mean this? She whispered. Oh my God, Dad. It's nothing, Harold said quickly. Just precautionary. Precautionary. I said, my voice rising for the first time. You told the church I was sick. You set up a memorial fund. You sent my obituary to our daughter. You filed an insurance rider with my signature on it. And you call that precautionary? His jaw clenched. You don't understand, Ruth. I was trying to prepare. For your retirement, maybe. With my death check. Trevor stood up. Dad, is this true? Harold didn't answer. That silence was his answer. I reached into my tote and pulled out the folder. I made copies, I said, laying them neatly on the table. One for each of you. Since Harold likes organization, I thought I'd return the favor. Paige opened her mouth, then shut it again. Trevor muttered something about needing a lawyer. Nancy grabbed her kids and whispered, let's wait in the car. Harold looked smaller somehow, the kind of man who suddenly realizes his audience has left the theater. Ruth, he said, voice cracking, you're making a scene. Oh no, I said, smiling. This isn't a scene, Harold. This is an unveiling. I turned to the kids, who were standing awkwardly by the door. You see, I said softly, your grandfather loves lists. He made one for my death. Every call, every dollar, every song. But he forgot one thing. Paige blinked. What? I leaned closer. I'm not dead yet. That night, after they'd all left and Harold had retreated to the spare bedroom, I sat alone at the table. The pot roast sat cold and untouched in the center. The house hummed with the low guilt of a man pretending to sleep in the next room. Around 10, my phone buzzed. It was Paige. Ruth, are you okay? I typed back, better than ever. I'm meeting someone tomorrow to finalize a few things. You mean a lawyer? She wrote. No, I replied. A funeral director. I'm changing the names on my plan. Starting with the obituary. She didn't reply after that. Maybe she was too stunned. Or maybe she understood that some women don't stay silent forever. I picked up the obituary one last time. The words passed away peacefully at home glared up at me. I crossed them out with my pen and wrote, moved out peacefully, with purpose. Then I folded it neatly, slid it into an envelope, and wrote Harold's name on the front. Tomorrow, I'd leave it on his desk, exactly where I found mine. Because if he wanted to play at funerals, I'd let him attend his own first. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the air heavy with that pre-dawn stillness that comes before something breaks. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, black, no sugar, and watched the light creep across the floorboards. My obituary sat folded in front of me, the same way I'd found it in Harold's drawer 2 weeks ago. Harold shuffled in wearing his robe, eyes bleary, hair flat on one side. He stopped when he saw me awake, dressed, purse by the door. You're up early, he said cautiously. I have errands, I said. What errands? Oh, just taking care of a few things. Like you do. He frowned. Ruth, about last night. I held up a hand. Don't. You had your say when you wrote my obituary. He sighed, rubbed his temples, then muttered, You always make everything bigger than it is. Bigger than death? I asked softly. He didn't answer. When I left, he was still standing in the kitchen, robe open, staring at the empty coffee pot like it might tell him what to do next. My first stop was United Mutual Insurance. The woman at the desk, the same cheerful voice from the phone call, looked startled when I introduced myself. Mrs. Ellison. Oh, so lovely to meet you in person. Yes, I said pleasantly. I suppose most people who come here on my behalf don't introduce themselves. She blinked. I'm sorry. I smiled. I'd like to discuss a few unauthorized changes made to my account. Specifically, one filed last month with my forged signature. Her face went pale. Forged. I placed the photocopy of the insurance rider on her desk, my own signature beside it for comparison. That's not my hand. I was very much alive when this was filed. And I plan to stay that way. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the intercom. Mr. Daniels, could you come to the front, please? A tall man in a navy suit appeared, all professional confidence until he saw the paper. Mrs. Ellison, we'll take care of this immediately. If you don't mind stepping into my office. I followed, calm as spring rain. His office smelled like coffee and fear. He cleared his throat. Do you have reason to believe your husband submitted this without your consent? Reason. I said, lowering my voice. He wrote my obituary. He sent it to our church. He opened a memorial fund. He told people I was under the weather. If I hadn't found the paperwork, I'd probably be at peace by now. Mr. Daniels swallowed hard. That's extremely serious, ma'am. I agree. He leaned forward. Would you like to file a formal report? I smiled. Already have. My lawyer, Peter Jensen, should be calling you this afternoon. Mr. Daniels blinked. You already? Like I said, rising, I'm organized. When I left, he was still on the phone, stammering into the receiver about liability and ethics review. Next, I went to the Courier, our small-town paper, the same one Harold had planned to publish my death in. The editor, a kind woman named Linda, looked puzzled when I introduced myself. Oh, Mrs. Ellison. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said automatically. Then, realizing what she'd said, turned crimson. "Oh my, sorry, I understand," I said, handing her the obituary. "This was submitted recently under my name. I'd like to retract it before it's printed." Her eyes widened. Oh dear, yes, we received this through email from your husband." I assumed. "You assumed correctly," I said. "He was planning ahead. Too far ahead." She exhaled shakily. "Do you want me to remove it from the archive system as well?" "Every trace," I said. "And Linda, if you don't mind, when you're done deleting it, I'd like to publish something else in its place." "Of course. What would you like to publish?" I slid a folded paper across her desk. "An open letter. Title it On the Rumor of My Death." Her eyebrows rose as she read. "This is sharp," she said, smiling faintly. "Print it as is," I said. "No edits. People like stories in this town. Let's give them one that's true." By the time I walked out, I could already picture the headline on tomorrow's front page. When I got home, Harold's car was gone. There was a note on the counter. "Ruth, gone to see Jensen. We need to talk about this madness. Don't do anything rash." I laughed out loud. Madness. Men always call it madness when a woman stops playing dead. At 2:00, my lawyer called. "Well," Peter Jensen said dryly, "your husband just came storming into my office demanding to know why I'd filed a restraining clause on your policy." "And what did you tell him?" "That he should sit down. He didn't." "Good," I said. Peter chuckled. "You've made quite an impression, Mrs. Ellison. The insurance rep confirmed your story. They're launching an internal fraud inquiry. I expect they'll freeze all payouts until it's resolved." "Perfect," I said. "That should keep him busy." "Anything else you'd like me to handle?" "Yes," I said. "Send him a copy of my new will. Certified mail." By evening, Harold came home furious. I was sitting on the porch, watering the hanging ferns, when I heard the car door slam. "What the hell have you done?" he shouted, stomping up the steps. I set the watering can down slowly. "Which part?" "You went to the insurance company. The bank froze the account. Jensen sent me paperwork like you're divorcing me." "I'm not divorcing you," I said calmly. "I'm burying you. Legally." His jaw dropped. "You can't just." "I can," I interrupted, standing. "You wanted a widow, Harold. You wanted to be the poor grieving husband with sympathy casseroles and donation checks. Now you've got what you wanted, only this time, you're the one being left behind." He stared at me, breathing hard. "You're insane." "Maybe," I said softly. "But I'm alive. Which is more than you planned for." He took a step closer. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, voice low and steady. "You will." I turned and walked inside, leaving him standing there in the fading light, small and shaking on the porch he used to call ours. The next morning, the whole town knew. I didn't have to say a word. The Courier's front page ran my open letter in bold black ink. On the rumor of my death. To my dear friends and neighbors. You may have heard I passed away. You may have even sent a casserole. Thank you for your concern, but as you can see, I'm quite alive. Unfortunately, someone close to me mistook for better or worse for life insurance purposes only. Let this serve as a reminder, always read what others write about you. Especially if they plan to profit from your peace. Ruth Ellison. By noon, people were calling non-stop. Some pretending it was to check on me. Most just wanted gossip. I didn't indulge them. I just said, "Yes, it's true," and left the silence to finish the story for me. Harold didn't come home that day. His golf buddies called once, asking if he was okay. I told them, he's just taking some time to grieve. 2 days later, a letter arrived from United Mutual, official and embossed. I slit it open carefully. "Dear Mrs. Ellison, we have concluded our preliminary investigation and found multiple inconsistencies with the policy updates made under your account. All future actions on this policy require your in-person authorization. Additionally, your spouse's access has been revoked pending legal review." I folded it neatly and placed it on his pillow. When he returned that night, red-faced and exhausted. He stopped in the doorway of our bedroom and stared at it. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's justice," I said. "You've ruined my reputation," he snapped. "Oh, Harold," I said gently. "You did that the moment you started rehearsing my funeral." He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Then, for the first time in years, he didn't have a list, or a plan, or a defense. Just silence. I turned off the light and went to bed. A week later, Carol called again. "Ruth," she said softly, "I just wanted to tell you, your letter was beautiful. The whole congregation was talking about it. You're an inspiration." "Thank you," I said, though I didn't mean to inspire anyone. "Well, you did," she said. "You reminded us all not to let anyone write our stories for us." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. When I hung up, I stood by the window and watched the autumn leaves fall across the yard. The same maple that Harold once said would look better cut down, now shimmered gold against the sky. The air was sharp, clean. For the first time in a long time, I felt it again, that small pulse of freedom people mistake for loneliness. Harold moved into the guest room permanently. He stopped going to golf. He stopped talking at church. People whispered when he passed, and he pretended not to notice. But I noticed. Every quiet nod, every sideways glance, they were my applause. He had planned for a eulogy. Instead, he got an audience. And as I walked past his door one night, I heard him mutter to himself, the way guilty men pray. I smiled and went on to bed. He had wanted a peaceful death. Instead, he got a living reminder. And I, for once, had peace. It's been 3 months since the obituary incident, as folks around town now call it. They say it like it's a local legend, half gossip, half warning. Don't pull a Harold, people joke when someone tries to get clever with paperwork. The first time I heard it, at the post office, I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my letters. Life, it seems, has a way of leveling things out, even if it takes the long road to get there. I sold the insurance policy the following week. Peter Jensen handled it for me, explaining each step until even the legal jargon sounded like freedom. "You're officially protected," he told me. "Everything in your name, no one can touch it without you signing first." "I like the sound of that," I said. He smiled. "You know, Mrs. Ellison, I've handled dozens of cases like this. Not one of them ended with the client this calm." "That's because none of them were teachers," I said, sipping my coffee. "We learn patience for a living." When I got home, I found Harold sitting on the back porch. The man who used to puff his chest out like he owned the air now looked deflated, hair uncombed, shirt half-buttoned, eyes dull. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Everyone knows," he said quietly. "I know. People whisper at the hardware store. Carol avoids me at church. Paige won't answer my calls." "That must be hard," I said, leaning on the doorframe. He turned toward me. "You enjoy this, don't you?" "I enjoy truth," I said simply. "It's been rare around here." He flinched. "You could have handled this privately." "So could you," I said. "But you wanted a show. You wanted an audience for your tragedy. I just gave you one." He didn't answer. Just nodded, as if finally understanding the weight of what he'd done. In the weeks that followed, he became a ghost in his own home. Ate quietly, moved carefully, stayed out of my way. Some nights I heard him crying softly in the guest room. Once, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then one morning, I found an envelope by the door. No return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, angular, precise. I opened it slowly. Inside was a clipping from a newspaper in another town. The headline read, "Man found deceased in motel room, insurance policy under investigation." The article mentioned the man's name, Victor Hanlon. Age 65. Married. Former accountant. At the bottom, in faint pencil, someone had written, "You're not the only one he planned for." My heart skipped. I didn't know the name, but the feeling, the cold that spread up my arms, told me enough. Harold had copied this man's idea. He'd been inspired by another's sin. I sat down hard on the couch, the paper trembling in my hands. For a long moment, I just stared at it. There was no signature, no explanation. Just proof that Harold's imagination hadn't been original, it had been borrowed from someone else's crime. Later that day, I went to Peter Jensen's office again. I handed him the clipping. He read it twice, frowning. Do you know this man? No. But I think Harold did. Do you want to pursue it? I shook my head. No. The dead can stay buried. I just wanted someone to see it. He nodded, folded the clipping, and tucked it into a file. You've done everything right, Ruth. You're free. Don't let him drag you back into the grave he dug. That night, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea and a quiet I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the wind brushed the shutters. The maple leaves whispered against the siding like soft applause. For the first time since all this began, I let myself think about love, not the kind you see in movies, but the steady kind that weathers decades of bills, birthdays, and burnt casseroles. I'd loved Harold once, deeply. I'd believed in his steadiness, his humor, his plans. I never noticed when that steadiness turned into control, when humor became condescension, when planning became plotting. Grief doesn't always wear black. Sometimes it wears a smile and brings you coffee in the morning. I stood, walked to the desk, and opened the drawer where the obituary had once been. Empty now, except for a single new envelope. Inside it was a fresh document, written in my hand this time. Obituary, Ruth Ellison, revised. Ruth Ellison lived a long, stubborn life. She loved her garden, her neighbors, and quiet justice. She is survived by her strength, her humor, and her unwillingness to die on anyone else's schedule. I smiled as I read it aloud. It sounded right. 2 weeks later, Paige came by. She looked nervous, clutching a grocery bag full of pastries. I didn't know what to bring, she said. I figured something sweet never hurts. Sweet always helps, I said, letting her in. She looked around the living room, now brighter, lighter. You've changed things. I like the light, I said simply. She sat down, twisting her hands. Dad told me everything. Well, his version of everything. I didn't believe it until I saw your letter in the paper. Must have been quite the surprise, I said, pouring coffee. It was. She looked up, eyes wet. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. You believe me now. That's enough. We talked for an hour. About her job, her kids, about how Harold was moving in with Trevor for a while. I nodded. That's good. He needs people around him. Keeps him from digging too deep. Paige smiled, half ashamed. You're really okay? I am, I said. It turns out, living beats dying. Even when you're supposed to be gone. She laughed softly. You're stronger than all of us. No, I said, leaning back. I just stopped being afraid. That evening, after she left, I went outside to water the azaleas. The air smelled of rain, clean and sharp. Across the street, a couple walked by, their laughter echoing down the block. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner, then looked back at my little house, modest, quiet, and mine. Harold's car was gone for good now. The guest room was empty. The air felt lighter. I went inside, poured a final cup of tea, and stood at the window. My reflection looked back at me, an elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a low bun, lines on her face that told stories no obituary ever could. I raised the cup in a small toast. To all the living women who refuse to die before they're done. The tea was strong, a little bitter, but warm all the way down. I picked up the folded obituary from the table, my revised one, and slid it into a photo album between pages of old memories. That's where it belongs, not as an ending, but as proof that sometimes the dead get a second draft. Outside, thunder rumbled softly in the distance. Somewhere, Harold would read about another man found guilty of insurance fraud. Maybe he'd realize that planning someone's death was the easiest way to kill your own life instead. As for me, I finally stopped marking my days by fear. Every Wednesday, I take a walk. Not to faint, not to fall, not to disappear. But to live. Because sometimes, revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's the quiet, stubborn act of surviving them.